Okay, let's get going. So I'm James. I'm one of the tech champions for the Digital Culture Network. I'm not delivering the session today. Who is delivering the session is Syed, so he's going to join us in a second. And Syed is our search engine optimization and search engine marketing expert. So all the stuff around that is going to cover in this webinar, the kind of how you can use data to improve those decisions you make in your organization. So this session is recorded, so if you ever want to watch any of this back, you'll be able to do so on our website following this. We'll also have resources that, that Syed is going to talk through that you'll be able to use through his examples. So if you want to replicate anything that he's doing, you better do with all the resources he's got. If you want to chat with us, you can do so using the chat facility. So it's at the bottom of the page. There's a little chat icon, click that. And if you want everybody to see your messages, you just select all panelists and attendees from the drop down. And if you just want us to see it as the panelist, you can just select just panelists. And if you want to ask any questions about the session from today, just use the Q&A facility. So if you press that, you can ask a question about anything that we cover in the session, and we'll go to those at the end and then answer. We'll go through. I'll ask them on your behalf to Syed, and we'll go through them step by step. So again, you can ask anonymous questions if you don't want if you don't want us to know who it is. So yeah, I'm going to pass over to Syed now, and he's going to deliver this session. So Syed, are you there?
I am here.
Excellent. I'll leave it in your capable hands, and I'll see you at the end. I'm going to be manning the chat, so if you want to ask any questions and stuff, so I can put links and things in there. So I'll see you at the end, Syed. Good luck.
Thanks for that, James, and thanks everyone for joining us. It's great to be here talking about this, because this is something which is so important to everyone who's trying to use marketing in any way. Now, basically what we're going to be covering, there's going to be a few things, but the essence of it is we're going to look at how you can use software to manipulate data and make better decisions. Now, we're going to specialize here in SEO and PPC, so the examples I'm going to use are going to be SEO related, more for the most part, and a little bit of PPC examples in there as well. However, none of this is actually specific. It's something which is really useful across the board, whether it's social media or anything like that. Okay, so let's get into it. So the first thing I just want to go through is what we're actually going to cover. So first thing we'll be looking at is where do we get our data from? So things like different platforms and what can we actually pull up. Then we'll look at what software we can use to do the manipulation and display of that data in a way that makes it easy to understand. Then we'll look at the basic formula and functions you need. And then we'll look at the a bit more advanced kind of other things that you can do, which maybe are a little more technical, but still useful. And then the last thing we're going to do is look at how you tie it all together and output it. And then a little bit, we're going to talk about dashboards as well. Now, dashboards, we're going to look at, we're not going to go super in depth into it because that's a whole session to itself. Okay, so let's get into it. Where can we get data from? There's loads of places we can get our data from, but I'm going to point out some of the main ones that I use and that a lot of you might come across in terms of SEO and PPC. But remember, there's loads of others. So what do we have? We've got Google Search Console, Bing Webmaster Tools, Google Analytics, Google Ads, and SEM. As I mentioned, there's loads more. So let's dive down into these 5 and see what kind of data we can pull out to start off with. So Google Search Console. Now, if you're not aware, hopefully you all have this attached to your websites. But Google Search Console is a free piece of software that you connect to your website and it monitors your search performance. Okay, so the kinds of data you can pull out, I've listed some here, but there's loads more in there. So top landing pages. So which one of your pages are performing the best? Search query statistics. So what are people actually searching for across Google and its partner websites? Device statistics. So what I mean by that is what device are people using? And then link statistics. So what that is how many links are coming into your website from other parts of the web. If you've seen my SEO in an hour webinar or spoken in any capacity around that, or been attending the trainings, you'll know how important links are to SEO. Okay, and like I said, there's a lot more in there. Let's have a look at the next one. So we've got Bing Webmaster Tools. So Bing Webmaster Tools is kind of the equivalent of Google Search Console, but in Microsoft's world. There's a few key differences. So it still gives you the same information in terms of landing pages, search query statistics, link statistics, but from Microsoft Bing's perspective instead of Google's. But one key difference is this actually has a few extra features like SEO reports. Now what these are is these are audits of your website where it can pull out things like, are pages missing headlines? Are they missing alt, tags of any kind, alt tags on your images, descriptions, that sort of thing. Now, the reason that's really interesting is because that's something usually you have to pay a monthly subscription to another service for that automation of that. But Bing Webmaster Tools has it built in. Next up, Google Ads. So Google Ads is a service a lot of you may well be using, especially if you've got Google Ad grants, where you get the $10,000 a month for being a charity. Now, through this, you can get a lot of data. So things like click rate. So how often are people clicking on your content? Ad performance. How well is a specific ad doing? Keyword metrics. So what keywords perform really well? Landing page statistics again. So which pages do well and what happens? And then lastly, conversion rate. So when people do interact with your ads, what happens next? Are they converting on your website? And again, there's loads more in there. This is just the tip of the iceberg for this. Now, again, there's all data we can pull through. So Google Ads is another great source of data. And then next we have SEMrush. Now, SEMrush or SEMrush, you may not have came across because it's a more premium tool. It's something you pay for to get the real access to the data in there. So SEMrush is what we would call a search marketing expansion tool. Okay, so there's loads of these Ahrefs. There's things like Moz, and there's loads more out there. These are dime a dozen, but SEMrush is probably, if not the biggest and most popular, it'll be right up there. So some of the things it can do is give you something called content gap analysis. Now what that is where you put in your website and the competitors, and it tells you what content do they have that you don't, and vice versa. So what's the gap in the content between the two websites? Keyword coverage, again, you versus a competitor, who's covering which keywords, what are you covering that they're not, and vice versa. Again, link statistics. Now, what's interesting about the link statistics on a tool like this versus what you get out of, say, Webmaster Tools or Search Console is this will be a lot more detailed. This data will be a lot more detailed than you get out of any other tool, because what these companies will do is they will analyze the website it's coming from, not just tell you how many. They'll actually look at the website and see what kind of quality they are. You've also got advertising opportunities and other competitor analysis. Now, with these tools, there's absolutely loads more to come from them, because this is just one section that I've detailed some of the data you get out of. There's maybe 5 or 6 sections which you can get more data out of. Okay, and as I mentioned, there's loads more out there, like Ahrefs, like other analytics platforms. You might use Fathom or something like that instead. Okay, cool. So we've looked at where we can get data from. Now next, let's look at what software we can use to actually manipulate that data. So there's a few out there, but most of them work in a very similar manner, in all honesty, despite how different they might look or feel. So we've got 2 that you'll probably be familiar with, so Google Sheets and Excel. Very, very similar piece of software, but they do have some differences. Now, the other ones that I've labeled here, Tableau, Google Data Studio, and Power BI. So these are dashboard softwares. Okay, so these don't directly do the manipulation. They're more for displaying. Now, what's interesting about these is Google Data Studio actually uses Google Sheets as a basis. Okay, in essence, so anything you can do in Google Sheets, you can do in Data Studio. That's kind of how it works. And the same goes for Power BI to Excel. Because Power BI is Microsoft, Excel is Microsoft. They work really closely together. Tableau is a little bit different because that's a separate tool, but it can take input from both Google Sheets and Excel. So Google Sheets and Excel are what we're going to focus on. Okay, and that all the formulas and things like that I'm going to show you and demonstrate work in both. I've been really careful to pick ones and solutions that work in both, so that you're not tied down to one or the other. Generally speaking, these will work in other options like LibreOffice or things like that, because there are other spreadsheet softwares out there that you might use. And as I mentioned, there's loads more tools out there you can use, but a lot of them, like I said, do work fairly similar ways. Okay, so let's get to the basic formula and functions you're going to need. So the way this is going to work, okay, is I'm going to show you a formula, the syntax you need, so how it's written out. But then I'm also going to demonstrate it to you, okay, and actually show you it in action so you can kind of visualize how it works. Now, I'm going to show you on an Excel sheet that I've created, and that will be available to you afterwards as well, for you to play around with and download and do what you want with it, okay? So let's go into it. So the first one, okay, now you may have come across a lot of these before, but I'm going to go through them anyway, so you just make sure you understand them fully, is an if statement. It's dead easy. It checks if something is true or false, and you tell it what to output, if it's true or if it's false. Okay, so let's actually have a look at it. If statement. Okay, so here's the if statements. So the way that works is we're checking in this end column here, in the status column. Let me just get rid of these so I can type it in for you. What we're doing is we're checking if something is above or under budget. Okay, so the way this actually works is if we're typing A equals if, because that's the syntax. Now we need to tell it what test do we want to perform. What's our condition? So I want to check is actual higher than the budgeted. If that is true, I want to output over budget. If it's not true, I want to type in, I need to of course, under budget. Okay. And that's it. And then what I can do is simply just drag it down. There we go. Now in this column, I'm going to do something a little bit different. So in this one, what we've done is we've outputted a text string, you could call it. Okay, we've said if it's true, output some text. If it's false, output some text. In this one, what we're going to do, instead of outputting text, we're going to output a calculation. Okay, we're going to ask it to do some arithmetic. So again, equals if that is more than that. So what we're asking here, the question is, if that is over budget, tell us how much is over budget by. That's what we want to do in this column. So what I need to do is that minus that. And then if it's not true, so if it's not over budget, we want to return 0. And then again, if I just drag down, you can see it's told us the amount that is over budget always really returned a dash, which is 0. Okay, so that's how an if works. So it's simple as it checks if something is true or false, and then does something that you want to do off the back of that. Let's go back to the slides. Okay, next is if error. Now, if error is nothing to do with if. Okay, even if it says if in it, it's nothing to do with an if. All this says is if the formula that you're using errors in any way, output something. Okay, now the reason you might want to use this is because you've probably come across when you've used Google Sheets or Excel in the past, when you've done something wrong in a formula or the data's not right that you're trying to put into the formula, it comes up with different errors depending on what the error is. This helps you keep it clean, okay? Because there are times when those errors you want to maybe just always make them say 0 or blank. Okay, so again, let's have a quick look at it in action. So here we go. So what I'm going to do is for this, I want to know what's the ratio of the sold in the quarter, okay? So you can see it's giving us back error in calculation, and that's from an if error. So what I'm basically saying is if this divide, which I'm doing here, fails because you can't divide by 0. Instead of coming back saying, hash calc, which is what it'll come back with, I'm saying tell us error in calculation instead. So the way that works is equals if error. You can use I've used a minus instead of equals if error. And then I'm doing this column divided by that column. So this could be any formula, of course, just doing one for example's sake. So if errors, I want it to return error in calculation. And then close bracket, done. So you can see these ones have all returned successfully. But if I was to just delete that, you can see the formula has failed. But instead of coming back with an error, it's saying error in the calculation. It's saying an output. I could easily change that to be just 0, like that. Or make it, instead of a string 0, you can always just make it output a 0. Okay. So that's if error. Next up, let's have a look. We've got concatenate. Now, concatenate is one of the most useful statements you're going to come across in any spreadsheet tool. It's weirdly useful considering when you first hear about it, you'll think you'll never use it, but it actually is. So what it does is it allows you to join multiple strings together or multiple cells or whatever you want to lay it out as into one cell. Okay. It's a really, really useful tool, especially when you need to create things en masse. Let me show you what I mean. If I go into concatenate, okay. So here we've got an example where we've got a list of locations and a list of shows at different locations. Okay. Now, let's say I wanted to create some ad text, but I wanted to create loads at one go. Okay, because I can't be bothered to sit and type that out. What I can do is use concatenate to go equals concatenate. And then what it does, it asks for the first bit of text you want. So first bit of text I want is the contents of this cell, comma, open quote, because now I need to have the middle bit. So space, showing in space, close quote, comma. Now the third bit I want is a location. If I close bracket on that, you can see straight away it's created that. I'll pull that down, and I've created a new sentence out of different parts of text. Now, this can be really useful for if you're creating content or descriptions where you just want maybe you've got loads of event pages. You can easily use Excel just to create them dead quickly rather than having to type them out. You create the structure once, and then to use concatenate to input the bits that are needed. Okay, so that's concatenate. All right, so let's have a look at countif next. So countif, what that does is it counts the number of cells within your chosen range. So this could be a row or column that meets the given criteria that you've chosen. Okay, so is it a number? Is it above? Is it high, low, that sort of thing. So the syntax is equals countif, open bracket. Then you put the range. So this, like I said, could be a table, could be a column, could be a row, whatever. Then the comma. And then the criteria you want to check for. So is it containing a certain text string? Is it a certain value? Or is it high, low? Is it an arithmetic? Any of those things. So let's actually have a look at that in action just to show you what it looks like. So countif, where you gone? There you are. Okay, so I'm going to just delete the answer here just so I can show you how it works. So what this is, this table here, is an example of a download from a tool which tells you the anchor text from links coming to your website. So for those of you who don't know, anchor text is basically the label on the link. So when you make a link, the blue bit, it's whatever's typed in there. But sometimes some pages don't have anchor text because it might be an image or something like that. That's not very good for SEO because anchor text is useful for telling search engines what the page that it's going to is about. So where possible, we want them to all have anchor text. So you might have a download which is 300, 400 of these links, but you want to know how many of them say no anchor text. So the way you could do that is rather than going through manually and counting them, because that would take ages, you would just type in equals count if. Okay, choose your range. So in this case, I'm just going to highlight these 7 boxes, but you could do entire column or row, like I said earlier, comma. And now we need to type in what we're going to ask it to look for. So I'm doing open quote because I'm looking for a text string. And then it's no anchor text, close quote, close bracket. And you can see straight away, as soon as I hit enter, it's told us 3. That's the number. Okay, so that's countif. It's very straightforward, quite simple, but it's really, really powerful. So let's just jump back to the PowerPoint. All right, so next up, what we got? Text to columns. Now, text to columns actually isn't a formula; it's a function. Okay, so it's about this is an actual function built into the software, and it's in both Excel and Google Sheets. And what it does is it distributes the contents of a cell across columns. Okay, it splits it up. It's probably easier for me to show you this one definitely, because it can be a little bit weird to explain. Where you go? Okay, so you've got text to columns. Now I'm going to delete the output here and just show you what it does. So you can see here, I've got a list of URLs. So these are pages from the website. What I want to do is I want to split them into different sections, okay? And I'm going to show you how that works. So let's go to data after I've highlighted it, and then text to columns. And you can see it here. You can see that you've got 2 options here. You can split it by delimited, which is where you use a specific character to tell you where to split it, or you've got fixed width. Now, fixed width tells you basically, says, okay, I have a fixed number of characters split it at this point. In this situation, all of our different sections have different lengths, so we won't know what the fixed width is. So we need to use delimited. Go next. Now, by default, tab is selected, but you can see in the preview that doesn't do anything. Why? Because there's no tabs in our data. So that makes sense. So what I'm actually going to do is untick tab and tick other, and I've put a / in there. And you can see straight away it has basically corrected it and split it out. Now, there's a tick box here that says treat consecutive delimiters as 1. What that does is if it's got, say, 2 / after each other, it'll treat them as 1. It'll make them basically, and it'll stop you from blank columns. Just to show you what that does if I untick that, you can see it's created a blank column because there's 2 / So I'm just going to leave that tick to keep it clean. And then go next. You can format the columns here, but I'm not too worried about that because these are all text. And then lastly, I do want to just choose the destination as being here. And then hit finish. I'm getting an error because I've just deleted data, but that normally wouldn't be there. And I've just hit OK. And there you go. You can see it's split it into its different sections. All right. So that's really useful. Right. Let's get into the more advanced stuff now. So that's the basics, and that's the stuff that is going to be bread and butter for this sort of work. Okay. Ifs, if errors and things like that, they're the kind of stuff that you're going to use constantly. You'll notice I haven't mentioned things like, your really basic stuff like sums and things like that, and actually just normal formulas. And that's because they honestly don't come up all that often in data analysis because you don't want to amend the data. You don't want to have to edit it. You just want to make it more visible. Okay. So let's have a look now. So we've got, first one we're going to look up is VLOOKUPs. Now, VLOOKUPs might be something that you've come across, and they look fairly complicated, okay, but they're actually not, okay. So the way that VLOOKUP works is you tell it what you want to look up, so what's the value you want to look for, in a range, okay, but it always looks in the first column of that table. So you say, okay, in table 1, look for this value in the first column, and then return whatever's in the third column along, for example. You can say number 3, I want it in the third column along, tell me what's in that cell. Let's look at it in action because it's like I said, it's simpler than it seems. So we've got two tables here. We've got table 1, table 2. So table 1 has got a keyword in it, and it's got the rank that keyword is at. Table 2 has a bunch more keywords in it and the volume, the search volume for it. Now, in real life, this table on the left, table 1, might be 40, 50 keywords long. Table 2 might be 100, might be 200 long in real life. Of course, I don't have time to sit and go through that. I'm too lazy. So let's find an easy way to do it. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to ask the formula to look for the contents of this cell, so Digital Culture Network, in this table, in table 2, and return that, the volume. Okay, so that's exactly what it's doing there. So the way that looks like in reality, so equals VLOOKUP. Okay, so we want to choose the cell that we want to look for. So in this case, it's that. Okay, we want to look for the keyword, comma, where do you want to look for it? So in this case, I'm going to select this table. And which column do I want to output? So I want to output the second column because the keyword column is the first one. The second column is the one that I want to output. And then comma, and I'm going to put in false. Now, the reason for that last part where I'm saying false is because I don't want it to do, I want it to look for an exact match of that first part. Okay. And there you can see it's pulled out 100. Now, if we pull it down, you can see for Google Analytics Basics, it's pulled out 150. So just to go through that again, what it's done is it's looked for the contents of this cell of the keyword column in table 3, in table 2, and out and find the volume for us. Okay, so this is a really good way of basically connecting two bits of data together to make them into one. Okay. So what's next? So next up, we're going to look at basically what is VLOOKUP but upgraded. Okay, it's a more powerful version, but it's more complex, which is why it's useful to know both. Because most of the time, VLOOKUP is simple and it's relatively simple, and it's going to do the job. But sometimes it won't, and that's the biggest problem. So let's have a look at the solution for when it won't. So this is something called index match. Now, index match is actually a combination of two different formulas, which I'll go through separately in a second. But what it does, now the biggest problem with VLOOKUP is the value that you're looking for. So if we go back to our example, VLOOKUP, this has to be in the left column, the leftmost column of the table you're looking in. Now, if you've got a big table, which is different order columns, let's say the keyword was in column 2, VLOOKUP's not going to work unless you reorganize the table. Now, if you've got a lot of data, reorganizing the table is a nightmare, to make it the right order for you to work in. So instead, you can use something like index match because that can look in both directions. Okay, it doesn't matter where the value you're looking for is. Now let's actually look at that. Let's break it down because, like I said, it's two separate functions. There's index and there's match, and then together they create index match. So what is index? So index returns a value, okay, that is in a cell which you say is a row X and a column Y. Okay, easier if I just show you this because it's actually really straightforward. So I've got a table here which has lots and lots of different, values in it all over the place. Now, what index does is equal index in this range. So if I choose the table, so I'm highlighting the table here. I want to know what's in row number 4, let's say. So 4, and then column 6. Close bracket. Row 4, column 6. I have to do 4, column 6, 356. So you can see it's literally went 4 down, 6 in, and went, that's the number there. So that's what index does. Okay. Then next up, we've got match. So match is a little bit more complex, but it's still quite simple by itself. What it does is it returns the position of an item in a column. Okay. when you're looking for an item. So you say, look for this value and tell us where it is in this column. So again, let me just show you how that works in action. So let's say I want to look for the value 15 in here, okay, in a column here. But I know it's in this column because there it is. So if I do equals match, lookup value is 15. So I want to look for the number 15 in this column. I'm going to put 0 because that's the default. You can see it's in the 5th row down. So it's telling us it's in the 5th row. So that's what match does. It tells you where something is in a column, how many rows down. And index returns the item that's at a certain column or row. Okay. Now let's look at how that works when they're together now to make a really powerful search function in essence. Okay. So you can see here we've got the example from before, but there's a slight difference. The difference is table 1's still the same. It's got keyword and rank as per before, and it's got the volume and the keywords same as before, except they're the other way around, because in the original example that I gave you, that I showed you, keyword was first, volume was second. Now VLOOKUP wouldn't work here because what would happen is VLOOKUP would try and look for that keyword in this column, which of course isn't going to work. So what we would do instead is we've got a really, really complicated looking formula, but it does the job better. So the way this works is instead it's going to look for this in the keyword column, okay, because we know which column is the keyword column, and then give us the in that table, give us the first column. Okay, that's what we're going to ask it to do. So the way it works, let me go type it out. So equals index first in this table. Okay, we want to know. Sorry, that table. We want to know what is in when we do a match, because remember in index you ask for the row first. So match this to whatever's in this column, and then 0. Close that. So what we're asking here is match is saying, okay, look for this in this column, okay, in the keyword column of table 2, and tell us which row it's in. That's all we're asking match to do. The index is saying, in this table, find the value that is at this many rows down, which match has told us, comma 1, because we want to know column 1. And you can see it's pulled that. Okay, it's found that for us. Okay, so it's being able to look at that and go, right, let's find the cell value that's there. So again, just to go through that again, match has said, okay, I'm going to find this keyword in table 2 in the keyword column and tell you which row it's on. So in this one, the row would be, what's that, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then index, which is around it, is going, okay, I'm going to return the figure that's at row number 6, column 1, because 6 has come from match. Okay, so that's an index match. Okay, like I said, it's a bit more complicated to work with, but there are times when it is the only solution. Okay, so it's important to know. But like I said, it's for the most part, VLOOKUP will do the job. Just those edge cases when you need something a bit more powerful. And then next, we have pivot tables. So pivot tables are a powerful tool. Okay, they're really, really powerful. They're probably the go-to for most people who are working with data in any way. Because what they do is they let you really flexibly manipulate data just in their very nature. They can look really complicated, but actually they're quite simple. And the best way to get used to them is just use them and mess around. Now, pivot tables, I'm not going to show you an example directly in that sheet because you need some real data really to make it work. But that does bring us nicely to the next section, which is where we're going to try and bring it all together. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to go through a live demo with you of me taking some raw data, okay, which I've exported, and then slightly, I've messed with the data slightly just to make it a bit more realistic, but it is data that you can pull from tools. And I'm going to try and answer a couple of questions. So, like I said, the data is going to be a mix of dummy and real data, okay, from our website. What we're going to try and do is identify which authors have written the most authoritative and engaging content for our knowledge hub. Then what we'll do is we'll also use it to get basically the same answers, but by category. So which category is the most engaging? Throughout this, I'm going to use text to columns, if statements, index match, and pivot tables. Okay, so let's go to the example sheet. So this is an example of the kind of data you might get. Okay, so you can see here, I've got a bunch of URLs. I've got the author first name, I've got author last name, and I've got category. Excuse me. So what we need to do is somehow make it so that this answers the question. Now, I've got two more sheets in here. I've got article views data. So again, by URL, I've got the page views, unique page views, total links, inbound, total link and root domains, and page authority. Okay, these are all SEO related metrics. Again, you'll see there's a lot of URLs, but they're not in order. Okay, they're not in any order. Neither is this one. Engagement metrics, again, they're in different order, but they've got Facebook shares, LinkedIn shares, tweets, and downloads. Okay, so this is all the engagement metrics for the URLs. Now the problem is they're not in any order. Okay, they're not in one sheet, so there's no way for me really to at the moment to group them together and understand the answer to those questions. But there is ways we can do, but using the things that we've learned, we can actually get it to that point. So what's the first thing we need to do? Well, the first thing I think I need to do is identify which one of these URLs are in the knowledge hub and not. Because remember, if we go back to the original question, we're only concerned with data about articles in the knowledge hub on our website. So the way that would work is I'm just going to highlight that, go to data, and text to columns. Now the reason for that is because if we have a look at the URLs, you can see it says knowledge in them. They're the ones that are in the knowledge hub, and I know that as part of the team that built the website, so we know that. So we know that information, so we can use that to identify them. So if we go next, and you can see I've already got this set up, but you would take other, put the / in, take the consecutive delimiters, and you can see it's breaking it down for us into different parts. If I go next, and where do I want it to output? I want it to output on this last new column here. Finish, and you can see it's done it. Okay, so let me just do that. Now, you can see there's a lot of extra data here now, though, because I'm not bothered about this. So let's get rid of that. Let's clean it up a little bit. I'm not bothered about that because that's not going to help. Delete that. And I'm not actually bothered about what page it is because I'm looking at the category level. So I can get rid of that. And let's just quickly title this to be folder 1. That's what it is. Okay. So we've pulled that through now. Now the next thing we want to do is, this is just to make it easier to manage data. It's something which you should try and do as much as possible in Excel or Google Sheets. Is when you've got a table of data like this, if you just select the top line of it and go to insert and then table, it'll pre-select the table for you. Just double check that's correct. So that is correctly highlighting it. And if you've got headers, take my table of headers and just press OK. What that does, it turns it into a table of its own right. Now, the reason that's really useful is because it makes it easier to read formulas. Instead of saying, formula, the formula saying column A, A1 or A14, it'll say URL row 14. And it just makes it easier for you to read. Now, the next thing I want to do is I want to just add, basically what I want to do is ask the table, is this a knowledge hub article or not? Now, the reason for that is because I want to later be able to add a yes, no toggle to be able to say, yes, it's a knowledge hub, and it just filters it for me. I don't want to have to go into here and untick all of these just to knowledge hub. I want to make it easier than that. So KB question mark. So what I can do here is if, now the other good thing about a table is you'll need to enter the formula once. So if this one is equal to knowledge So you can see here, or it's because it's a table, it instead of saying, cell E2, it's put folder 1, because that's the name of the column. I want it to say yes if it's true, and no if it's not. And you can see straight away it's put it in all the cells for me. So that's one of the really good things about a table, is it does a lot of automation for you. Okay. So I'm going to come over to this table, and I'm going to just do the same thing to make it into a table, so that later on it's easy to manage. So if you just highlight any cell in the table area, go to Insert, and then Table, and then hit OK, and it'll just do it for you. Again, I'm going to do it on this one. So Insert, Table, OK. We've got that. So what we've got now is we've got 3 tables on 3 different sheets. And what we've done is we've been able to break this URL up and identify whether or not a URL is in the correct category that we're interested in the correct part of the website. Next, we need to start pulling data in from other sheets into this one. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to use index match for this. Okay, but a VLOOKUP would do for this data because the URL is in the first column. Now, if this was a different order, it wouldn't. But for this one, I'm going to use index match just to show it. So first thing I want to pull in is the page views. So what I want to do is ask Excel to tell us for this page, this URL, how many page views has it got? Okay, so we're going to do that. So if I just name the column first, page views, and then go with the formula. So equals the index, and it would be look across this table. There you go. So you can see table 2 all at the top where the formula is. Okay, so across that table, now I want to match this, okay, the contents of that cell in this column. Now it's not headers. I'm not just headers. So you might need to tweak the stuff a little bit. Yep. Let's go with extra. And comma, looking for exact match, that's 0. 0. And I'm looking for the, what's that, second column in? Yeah. So you can see it's pulled in the second column from that table, 2484. So let's just sense check that. So let's look for that piece of information. So Digital Culture Network, where are you? There you are. Okay, so that's actually pulled in the wrong number. So that's interesting because what that's done, let me just check, is obviously pulled in the wrong number. So we need to figure out why. Now, the reason is because it's pulled in that one. Okay, it's pulled in the one above. So that means, if I just get rid of that, there we are. So the reason was because it was looking for this line as well. So it's basically putting it up by 1. Sometimes you will just get little things like that, and it's always important to sense check one thing at a time. Okay. So basically what I would do next is continue that for each of these columns. So unique page views, total links, link remains, page authority, Facebook shares, LinkedIn shares, tweets, and downloads. And what you end up with is this. So you can see here, this is the same table. I've just finished it. Okay, so you can see if I go along, we've got KB, yes or no, which we had, page views, unique page views, LinkedIn pages, page authority, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn downloads. Okay, so what we've done is managed to get all that data into one table, okay, from 3 different sheets. But still, this is not exactly usable. If we go back to the original question, which was identify the authors that are the most authoritative and engaging, this is still not answering that in any way, shape, or form. I can see the authors, but that's impossible for me to work that out. So let's try and make it a bit easier. And this is where pivot tables come in. Okay. So if I just, I don't have to highlight anything for this again. I just need to be in the table, like selected a cell. Go to Insert and then Pivot Table. You can see it's automatically selected the table because it identified that's correct. I want it to be on a new worksheet. Okay, I want it to be on a new sheet altogether. So hit OK, and it's brought this up. So what it is it's saying build a report, choose the fields from the pivot table field list. So this is all on the right here. Now, the way this works is you start off with what do you want to group your data by. So that's the first thing we need to know. Now, remember, we want to group by author. We want to know by author what's the output. So if I just tick author, you can see it's put that on the left. Okay. Now, you can actually stack these. So you can basically you can drop down, you can deep dive into each level. So if I tick URL, you can see straight away, it's kind of put underneath Dean. It's got all the pages that he's authored. And underneath digital content, it's got all the pages that are authored by that, and so on and so forth. Okay. And then what you can actually do is right click on where it says the name or whatever the first group is, and you can collapse it. So it's all hit nice and neat. So what we've got there is we've got the groups that we need. Next, we need to actually put the data in. Okay. So one of the great things about pivot tables is it's really smart at actually identifying what different things are. So I don't need to worry about kind of where these are going. I can just tick, 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 tick all these, and it's just added them in. So it's saying, I can see here, Dean has had 18,255 page views across all his articles. He's had 758 Facebook shares. He's had 1,089 downloads. Okay. I can look at that per author. Now, one of the problems here is it's showing that. Okay. Because them pages are not in the knowledge base. Remember, we're only interested in the knowledge base. So if we come over here and where it says KB ? And drop that into filters, you can click and drag and drop that into filters. See up here, it says KB ? I can just choose yes. And it's filtered the data. Okay. So you can see straight away, I've just been able to change that to all of a sudden show the data in a much more appealing and kind of actually legible form. So we've went from having a big table to a nice grouped up one, which is a lot easier to understand. Now, the thing that we've got to think about now, though, is let's go back to our original question, which is identify the authors which have written the most authoritative and engaging content for a knowledge hub. I still can't really do that from this data at this point because I can't, in my head, add these up and see which one's the top. I can't really do that. I don't have the mental capacity for that. So let's do something a bit different. Let's visualize it. So let's insert and go to pivot chart. Okay, so we can choose different type of charts we want to use. I'm going to use a stacked one because I think that'll be the most understandable for this, and hit OK. And you can see there, I can now identify using this which one's been the most successful, you could say. Okay, that's going to give us a lot better output. So we've went from, if I go back to there, we went from this being just this much data on this one sheet to actually having a graph which displays all the different metrics together in a way that makes sense. Okay, and that's how useful this stuff is because it's completely transformed that into something which is actually usable. Now, the second question we had was use the same data set to identify the most engaging categories. Okay, now to show you how flexible pivot tables are, if you weren't using pivot tables, you would have to go back and rebuild this chart. Instead, what I can do is just remove these and drop category into there at the top. Again, just collapse all of these to make it nice and neat. And you can see there it is. That's my category. Simple as that. Okay, all I've done is just change the way it groups it. So I can see now the content category is the most engaging. Okay. Now, of course, if I wanted to ignore downloads, I can just untick it. If I want to ignore unique page views, because that's going to be duplicate page views anyways, I can do that. And you can see straight away, it's reflecting those changes. It's a really good way of being flexible. Okay. So that's the end of that little demo. Hopefully that was useful. And it actually kind of showed you how that can all work. Next, we're going to touch on dashboards. Okay, we're not going to show you any demos of this because it's kind of hard to show without doing a whole session on it. But let's just talk about what they are. So a data dashboard, it's a management tool, okay? And the idea behind it is it's for displaying key indicators of performance, okay, key data points. And it's about monitoring performance. So 4 things that a good dashboard should do. It should answer the important questions. I've just noticed a typo, so that's great. It should provide interactive visualization. So generally you should dive down into them. You should get at a glance idea of the performance, and it should be easy to understand by the people who need it. Okay. So how do dashboards work? Generally, the way they work is they pull in data from multiple sources, like the ones we mentioned earlier, and then they let you manipulate and output the data in some way. So it's kind of what we just did, but in a more slick fashion, you could say. So the different platforms, you've got Tableau, Funnel, Data Studio, Power BI, but there's loads out there, and they all work fairly similar ways. One of the key things to remember, though, is if you get a free dashboard platform like Google Data Studio, it's free, but to get certain connections to other softwares, so like pulling data from other platforms, often you have to pay for that. So just something to keep in mind with dashboard softwares. There is a reason they're free, and then to get anything extra, it's paid. One of the important things to remember as well about dashboards is that they're not for everyday, they're not for people who need deep dive information. They're for at a glance information. So if you're going to be working with data day in, day out, dashboards are great for having it at a glance, kind of, in the morning, check how things are going, but they're not going to do the deep dive analysis that you often need. Okay. Right. Well, that's that. Sorry about the sound issues. But if we have James maybe drop back in, we can see if there's any questions.
Hello, Syed. Thank you so much for that. I think what you've shown us is how powerful Excel can be to manipulate that data in that way, because we've all had it. It's been installed on our Windows computers for years. And to be able to see all those different types of formulas that you can use, I think that's fantastic. So firstly, yes, sound issue. So maybe the recording we put on the website is a combination of the one that we recorded as a test run.
Yeah.
So then anybody rewatching that, you've got to hear clearly all the different parts of it. In the chat, we had a couple of messages about what people were struggling with, and one that someone couldn't follow properly was about COUNTIF. So
okay.
Nip back to there and just quickly.
Absolutely.
That bit. And then we've got a couple more questions as well about other things.
Cool. So let me just quickly explain COUNTIFs again. Thanks for that, James. So COUNTIFs, the way they work is they count how many of something exists in a range. Okay, so in this example, we've got a bunch of links, and we want to know how many of them don't have anchor text. So anchor text, if you're not aware, is when someone links to you, it's the text that's on the label. But for SEO, you want that to be labeled as much as possible because it tells search engines what the page is about. So in this example, there might be, there's only 7 on here, but there might be 500 of these. So you want to know how many of them don't have anchor text. So the way that would work is you would type in equals COUNTIF. So COUNTIF, what the range that you want to look in is. So in this case, this column, comma, and then what you want it to look for. So I wanted to look for the text of no anchor text. Okay. And it's going to tell us 3 times in that column that exists. So it's a way of literally just counting that. Okay. Was that all right?
Yeah, makes sense to me. Let us know if you want us to go through that again. The other question that we had in the Q&A was about match type and why you put a 0 on the end.
Okay, so match type changes depending on what formula it is, but I think the one that you might have been referring to would have been on this one, the match statement. So let me actually show you it in here. So the match type, basically what it does is it changes the way that a number especially works in the match formula. So if we say 1, okay, it'll look for a value that is less than or equal to, okay, whatever you've put in as the search value. The 0 is exact match, so look only for that, and then -1 is greater than. So if I wanted to, in this example, match to the first row that it finds, which is less than 15, I could have 1 in there, not 0, 1. Okay, and so on and so forth. So that's basically what the match type works. It's generally speaking, you leave it as 0 because it's very rare you need anything other than that.
Yeah, excellent. That makes sense. And the last question we've got so far, if there's any more questions, please add them now in the chat. The last question I've got is around the stuff you were talking about at the very beginning when you were talking about like Bing Webmaster Tools and the different, so there's like Search Console, Bing Webmaster Tools, so there's different ones. The question was around, does Bing look at the results from across all search engines, or is it just Bing?
Yeah, so Bing will look at just Bing, and the Google one will look at just Google in terms of like search queries and your top keywords and that sort of thing, and your top landing pages. If it's in Bing, remember I mentioned the one thing that's different in there is the SEO reports. The SEO reports have nothing to do with search engines directly. They're to do with your website and how it's developed and built. So that kind of is irrelevant of the search engine.
Great, thank you. So that's it for questions. If anybody has any more, we've got minimal seconds to get it in. But as I said before, the recording of this, what we're going to do is do an improved audio one. So all the bits that dropped out will replace with ones where we can hear Syed. So you better rewatch that at any time. It'll be available on the website next week. And we'll also have any resources and the Excel spreadsheet that you can play around with yourself. On Monday, we're going to release a new set of webinars through to March next year. So you might want to keep an eye on the newsletter that goes out, or just go on the website and they'll appear on there. The next ones we've got coming up are the Connect to Culture webinar, which is all about evolving business models and revenue streams. So I've got got an ambulance going past my house. So that is on the 19th. Before that, we've got next week, which is Emma, who's our e-commerce tech champion, doing print on demand. So that's next Wednesday. So all about not having stock, but getting it printed on demand and making revenue through your online shops. And then we've got on the 26th, we've got an introduction to email marketing with Peggy. So please do join us on those webinars as well. I think that's it, Syed. Thank you so much. Just silence. Has he gone? Oh, you are there. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. If you do want support from us as tech champions, just contact us through the website or email us on digitalnetwork@artscouncil.org.uk, because we can offer one-to-one support for you for free for arts and culture organisations who are eligible for Arts Council funding.